Hey there, friends. Yinzers, WAP, bringing you another episode of Yinzology, the study of all things Pittsburgh. I wanted to share with you an amazing book that my friend let me borrow for a little bit. I don't know, I feel like I should be wearing gloves because on a good day, this book in good condition is like over $1,000. Like you just can't go down to Barnes and Nobles and buy this book. You can't purchase this book. Now you could go to University, Pitt, Penn State, Carnegie Library, go down there and you'll find hundreds, if not thousands of books like this. But who's going to go down there and do that? I don't think any of yins are going to be doing that. But so I wanted to share with you a little bit about this book, 1753 to 1876, the history of Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. Now, there's a day that's coming right around the corner where you can sit down and you can have a chat with GPT or Grok, and they're going to walk you through this book, no problem. But until that day comes, you come over here to Yinzology. We're going to walk you through and show you some of the pages on this book because it's beautifully illustrated. And it's fascinating to think about the years that it took, eyewitnesses and many people coming together to put a book like this together. First-hand accounts of stories of the Native Americans and the French and the English and just the history being made. It's first-hand knowledge collected rather than an algorithm. So you're going to get something different from a book. It's like, the way I think of it is like if you want to listen to, The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd, you could go on Spotify within seconds and you're going to have it playing in your ears, or you could go on a journey and look for an original vinyl album, and it may take you a while to find it without any scratches, and you're going to bring that album home and you're going to listen to it in a different way. It's going to be a different experience. So one's not better than the other. It's just, what are you looking for? And so a real book like this is going to bring you a different experience. And to quote the great LeVar Burton, butterfly in the sky, Yinzers go twice as high. Take a look. It's in a book. Reading Rainbow. I can't imagine trying to complete this right after the Civil War when so much is happening, in terms of rebuilding socially, economically, politically. This is at the end of 1876, just following the Civil War, putting this book, trying to finalize this and put it all together. The history of Allegheny County. You got the World Fair happening for the first time in the U.S., celebrating 100 years. You got things like the steam engine and the telephone, Bell telephone, showing off what they can do. So, like I said, there's a lot of history happening from 1753 to 1876. You've got the French expanding into the Ohio Valley, and there's all this tension between the French and the British colonies in North America. You've got the French and Indian War from 1754 to the 1760s. And then you've got the war ending with the Treaty of Paris in 1763. Then you've got in 1756 to 1763, the 7-Year War. 7 years that involve, the British, Prussia, France, Austria, Russia, reshaping, the landscape with global colonial empires and the British dominating their colonial power. Then there's the rising tensions of the American Revolution in 1763. And not only do you have the American Revolution and American Independence, 1776, but then you've got a revolution and the Napoleonic era of like 1789 to 1815. You got the French Revolution and the Reign of Terror. Napoleon Bonaparte seizes power of France, and that whole thing just expands across Europe and invades Russia. And you got the whole thing with Waterloo and the War of 1812. But then in 1815, coming up to the 1800s, you got industrialization. The British Industrial Revolution just accelerates and spreads, comes to America with innovations, again, the steam engine, railroads, all of these textiles, and it just all takes off and changes everything. Then in 1831, you've got the abolition of slavery. You also have 1846 to 48, you've got the Mexican-American War. 1848 to 1861 is kind of like a prelude to the American Civil War. 1852 was Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. 1860, Abe Lincoln is elected U.S. President. 1861 to 1865 is the American Civil War. North against the South. Battle of Antietam. Emancipation Proclamation. Union victory at Gettysburg. And then 1865, you've got the abolishment of slavery in the U.S., where Lincoln is assassinated. And then this reconstruction to rebuild the South. And then 1876 is the Battle of Little Bighorn, with the Lakota and the Cheyenne defeating the U.S. troops under George Custer. So a historical book like this is special. It provides a deep insight and again, primary sources of all of that history that I just mentioned. You're getting primary sources and narratives that were shaped by human perspectives and not an algorithm. If you sit down with a book like this, it's going to be a different type of journey, offering you a different type of context that's grounded in, it took extensive research and years of human hands to put a book like this together. So this is going to give you a more focused and authoritative study of history. And it's not so quick and easy. You got to put some work into it. You got to sit down and spend some time, hours and days and months, just kind of slowly combing through and learning various names and places. And it's just a beautiful example of a beautiful curated moment in time. View of Braddock's Battleground of July 9th, 1755, and it appears July 1776. Original sketches by artists of the highest ability. Philadelphia, L.H. Everts and Company. And we have all the illustrations right here. Along the line of the world's history, the Grand March of Nations, there have been many salient points. Babylon, Palmyra, Ephesus, Athens, Alexandria, Troy, Jerusalem, Mecca, Damascus, Rome, Constantinople, Carthage, Venice. 1,000 other cities were famous in their day, and around them clustered, centered for longer, shorter periods, the interests and hopes of millions of people. Now you got Allegheny County. And right away, you talk about the geographical and geological aspects of Allegheny County. You'll notice it means an area of about 750 square miles. Organized September 24th, 1788. Portions of Westmoreland and Washington. 1789, another small addition was made from Washington County. Originally organized, the county included all the country to northward, extending to Lake Erie. You'll notice we have a lot of French and English and Native American names. There's good reason for that, mostly oftentimes named after someone, or there's meaning behind the name. 3 principal rivers divide the county into 3 natural subdivisions. Portions lying north of the Ohio and Allegheny rivers, south and west of the Ohio and Monongahela being of nearly equal size, while the portion lying between the Allegheny and the Monongahela is somewhat smaller. The latter portion, however, includes the main city of Pittsburgh, exceedingly rich in historic matter, having within its borders the sites of all the old fortifications and Braddock's and Grant's battlefields. Along the principal watercourses, the bluffs rise majestically to a height from 400 to 600 feet. Much comparatively level land, well adapted to agricultural pursuits, particularly fitted for the production of various kinds of fruit. Heavily timbered, deciduous trees, oak, maple, hickory, beech, linden, elm, sycamore, walnut, chestnut, ash, locust, mulberry. We had a mulberry tree in the back of our yard in Bellevue. And here and there, small quantities of pine and hemlock. And then you have beautiful smaller streams, Chartiers Creek, probably named from Peter Chartier, half-breed trader, once quite prominent in the region. Turtle, Peters, Bull, Deer, Pine, Plum Creeks, Montour, Flaherty, Swickley, Sawmill, Streets, Catfish, Lowry, and Squaw Runs. The rivers contain many beautiful and fertile islands, Neville and Montour in the Ohio. The county is at present divided into 68 civil subdivisions. The 2 cities of Pittsburgh and Allegheny, 18 boroughs, and 48 townships. A carefully prepared history of each of these subdivisions going back to earliest times will be found under appropriate headings in this work. Here's where we get our Yinzer. A lot of our Yinzer comes from originally settled Scotch-Irish immigrants, partly from Europe, partly from the old settled portions of Pennsylvania and other eastern states, but in latter years many German, English, Welsh settlers came in, 2 later attracted principally by manufacturing and mining. Geographically, subterranean floor, Pennsylvania, you got granite, mica, slate, and marble, lying at various depths beneath the surface, from 1,000 to 20,000 feet. Beneath the anthracite and broad-top coal basins, wells might be sunk to the depth of more than 7 miles before reaching the former surface of the continent. Such wells would then begin to penetrate the same rocks which form the Adirondack Mountains of New York, the mountains of Labrador in Canada, hill country of Lake Superior, Black Hills, central ridges of Utah, some of the hills of southeastern Missouri and Arkansas, the Black and Smoky Mountains of North Carolina, Blue Ridge of Virginia, South Mountain of southern Pennsylvania, Durham Hills of eastern Pennsylvania, Highlands of New Jersey, southeastern New York, and some of the hill country of Massachusetts and Maine. Everywhere these rocks are characterized by the presence of immense beds of magnetic specular iron ore, being largely made up of feldspar and minerals containing iron. So here we have the history of Allegheny County. In the chapter 1, we're talking about the Indian nations, ancient traditions. There's already a lot going on before the settlers, the Europeans came. There was a lot going on, and it's interesting. Various nations of copper-colored races, subdivided into many tribes speaking a great variety of dialects, claimed to have descended from 2 original peoples, the Lenape and the Mengwe. And then you had some of these other ones, and they were subsequently known among the whites under the general name of the Delawares. These occupied regions extending from the Hudson River, Mohicanatuck. Nearly 40 tribes acknowledged the Delawares as their grandfathers. Many centuries ago, the ancestors dwelt far to the west in the wilds of the continent, that after many years they began moving eastward and arrived in course of time on the banks of a great river, which they named the Namosi Sipu, or River of Fish, which was the Mississippi. Here they first met the Mengwe, who had also migrated from a country far to the north and west, also finally reached the Mississippi, points north of where the Lenape had approached it. Then they had these spies of the Lenape reported that the country to the eastward of the great river was inhabited by a powerful people called Talagawe or Alagawe, from whom came the names of the Allegheny River and mountains. So we get Allegheny from this tribe called the Talagawe or Alagawe. These people lived in large cities situated among the principal streams and surrounded by fortifications. They were represented as being tall and strong, and some of them of gigantic stature. Now the Lenape asked permission to cross the river and settle in their vicinity. This was refused. They shut it down, but the Alagawe told them they could cross and proceed eastward to a country beyond the Alagawe. So the Lenape accepted the proposition and commenced crossing, but the Alagawe, watch out, they became alarmed at their numbers, fell upon them, and destroyed all who had got over, and warned the others. Like fate awaited them should they attempt the passage. In this dilemma, the Lenape sought out the Mengwe, took counsel with them. Oh, here we go. An alliance. You know, some things never change. You got to form an alliance, offensive and defense. Was entered into the two nations agreeing to conquer and divide the country. Terrible war followed. Through the many years, great slaughter on both sides, for the Alagawe fought valiantly for their country, but at length the United Nations prevailed, and the Alagawe were conquered, and the remnant of them driven far to the southward. The conquerors appropriated the land, divided it between them, the Mengwe taking the country around the Great Lakes, the Lenape choosing the region lying to the south, along the Ohio River and the tributaries. After many ages during which the nations lived peaceably beside each other, the hunters of the Lenape crossed the mountains, discovered the rivers Susquehanna and Delaware, and the great bays in which they discharged their waters. The process of time, the Lenape and the Mengwe became bitter enemies, so bye-bye to the alliance. And the Lenape and the Delawares claimed that this was brought about by the Mengwe, who stirred up the Cherokees by cunning treachery against them, and at great length discovered that the Lenape turned upon them with the determination of exterminating them. Their hatred was rendered the deeper from the fact that the Mengwe were said to have followed the practice of roasting and eating their captives. A little bit of cannibalism there going on. So the Lenape did not like the Mengwe because they eating their captives, thus reducing them in the eye of the Lenape to a level with the brutes. In order to defend themselves the better against the Lenape, the various tribes of the Mengwe formed a confederation called the Five Nations, consisting of the Mohawks, Oneidas, Onondagas, Cayugas, and the Senecas. Subsequently changed 1712 by the admission of the Tuscaroras, who had been driven from North Carolina by the whites. From that date they were known as the Six Nations, and were no doubt the most celebrated and powerful of all the Indian nations of North America. They were called by the French the Iroquois, made up of 6 nations. Governor DeWitt Clinton of New York called them the Romans of America. These 6 tribes, the Iroquois, that made up of 6 tribes, they were badasses. The result of the collision between these great rival nations was the final subjugation of the Delawares, either by force of arms or, as the Delawares affirmed, by cunning and deceptive policy on the part of the Iroquois. So a lot going on with the tribes. Then you had the early settlements and explorations of the French. The French were the first Europeans to make settlements on St. Lawrence River along the Great Lakes, up there, Quebec, by Sir Samuel Champlain. Sir Henry Hudson was exploring the noble river which bears his name. Le Caron, Franciscan friar, who had been the companion and friend of Champlain, was the first to penetrate the western wilds, which he did in 1616 in a birch canoe exploring Lake Huron and its tributaries. Can you imagine being a Catholic monk in a canoe, a Franciscan friar, paddling along under the patronage of Louis VIII, the Jesuits, and began to vigorously the work of Christianizing the savages, 1632. And they talk about 3 more Jesuit missionaries doing all sorts of things in the wilderness. Get to chapter 3, where we find the early settlement of Pennsylvania and good old William Penn, the Great Treaty.